The Center for Disease Control says nationwide AIDS has struck 1,641 mostly homosexuals. 644 people have died from the mystery disease. The Allegheny County Health Department and the University of Pittsburgh Schools of Medicine and Public Health are now jointly applying for a special grant to help fund a major new AIDS study.
Hope to study as many as 7,000 gay male volunteers to screen them for AIDS.
The research will delve into risk factors, taking things like blood samples every 6 months. There have been about a dozen confirmed AIDS cases in the Pittsburgh area. That's very low when compared to cities like New York and San Francisco.
We may never get an AIDS epidemic in Pittsburgh, and the question is why? Why don't gay males in Pittsburgh acquire AIDS like they are in other cities? The second point is we may get an epidemic in the near future, so we want to be better prepared for that.
If Pittsburgh doesn't get the federal money, research here will continue, but on a smaller scale.
What we will not be able to do is the large screening type of program where we look for the development of AIDS in our community.
The homosexual community in Pittsburgh, like in other cities, is concerned and scared. Among other things, gay bars and restaurants like the Inner Circle are holding fundraisers. Restaurant manager Sean Logston is happy about the new research efforts.
People are not realizing how bad of a disease it is, and there's no cure for it.
In its first 2 years, Legionnaire's disease
We are taking this step because the epidemic of misunderstanding about how AIDS is spread and how it is not spread seems at times as difficult to control as the epidemic itself.
At the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, from the very beginning, Dr. James Kern has been in charge of AIDS activities in the United States.
We would estimate that there are approximately 1 million people who have been infected with the virus through sexual contact, intravenous drug use, etc. And yet, 7 or 8 years of observation, no evidence of transmission from those people to others through casual contact.
And at the National Institutes of Health, one of the nation's outstanding researchers on AIDS is Dr. Anthony Fauci.
It's transmissible, and it's transmissible sexually and by blood or blood products. But unlike other sexually transmitted diseases and diseases that are transmitted by blood and blood products, this disease, once you develop the full-blown syndrome of AIDS, is universally fatal, really.
It is justly fearful to recognize that we face an epidemic, a sudden and rapid spread of AIDS to thousands of people in this country. It is equally fearful that some 50% of these people have died, that to date, no one has recovered, that over 1 million others may be infected with the virus that causes AIDS, that we still have not produced a cure or a vaccine. In the face of these facts and the fears they promote, the unknown that can tip the balance between reality and hysteria is us, the people. People who care enough to understand the disease and to cope with it intelligently. AIDS is frightening for many reasons. Among them is the fact that it seems to challenge our 20th century notion that science has a ready answer for any problem that confronts us. AIDS is also a mystery to many of us. A mystery because it seemingly came from nowhere.
In the late spring of 1981, CDC became aware that several infectious disease physicians in New York City and Los Angeles were seeing a very unusual pneumonia, pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, in young men without any known cause of immune suppression. Dr. Michael Gottlieb first reported 5 cases of this pneumocystis pneumonia among homosexual men. It soon became clear that an unusual cancer was occurring also in gay men. This was really the first time that we'd ever seen an epidemic of cancer and an epidemic of severe infections occurring at the same time. And the common link had to be a breakdown in immunity, a breakdown in the immune system.
It soon became apparent that this disease was not restricted to gay men. Next, it was found among intravenous drug users, then people with hemophilia and recipients of blood transfusions. The evidence was growing that the cause was not only something new, but something transmitted by blood. Its sudden appearance on the human scene is perhaps not as unsettling as the way it works. AIDS results from a virus known as HTLV3 that attacks and immobilizes the very part of our system that normally protects us from viruses, from infections, from other foreign invaders.
Unlike other viruses which afflict man, this virus has the capability of attacking the very cell that's responsible to protect the body against other infections and other tumors. And that cell is a lymphocyte, which is part of the immune system. And the immune system's purpose is essentially the defense department of the body.
Here is how that defense department works with other viruses. A virus enters the bloodstream. A blood cell, known as a macrophage, detects this virus and sends out chemical warning signals. These chemicals activate lymphocytes, known as T cells. They locate the virus, begin multiplying, and call in B cells to attack the virus. The B cells also multiply and attack. The weapons these B cells fire are called antibodies. They coat the invading virus, deactivate it, and it is finally destroyed. Vital cells in the body are no longer in danger. And even after the virus is destroyed, many of the antibodies remain in the bloodstream and make us immune to the same type of virus in the future. Laser technology allows us to measure the level of T cells in the normal immune system and compare that with the effect of the AIDS virus.
What you do is actually measure specific cells that are implicated. For example, the T4 cells, which we've all heard about. You know, the T4 cells are supposed to be the cells that are being attacked by the HTLV3 virus.
When HTLV3 enters the bloodstream, the process begins as normal. A macrophage detects the virus and sends out its chemical warning signals, which activate T cells. But here the breakdown begins. The AIDS virus takes the offensive. It attaches to the T cells and enters them, and then uses up these very cells to grow and multiply. As the T cell is destroyed, many more of the AIDS viruses are spewed out into the bloodstream to repeat the process, and our immune systems grow weaker. When the B cells do appear to attack the virus, they find a virus that is resistant. Antibodies are created, but they are not effective in killing HTLV3. These antibodies remain in the system, but so does the virus, which continues to multiply and destroy the very T cells that normally start the attack against foreign invaders.
So we identify and quantitate the number of T4 cells that a particular patient has. And what we see in AIDS is basically the loss of those T4 cells.
This computer readout shows the level of T cells in the normal healthy immune system, compared with the level after the AIDS virus has had its effect. As a result, other kinds of foreign invaders in the future are able to bypass this weakened immune system and cause a variety of ailments and diseases to which most of us are immune. The resulting infections take advantage of this unique opportunity offered them by the weakened defense system. So they are often called opportunistic infections. Most common among these are a parasite called pneumocystis Carinae pneumonia, and a number of tumors or cancers not usually found in the general population.
I feel like I'm just waiting around to die.
They occur with a great deal of frequency in patients who have their immune system suppressed. So the cascade of events is infection with the AIDS virus, attack on the immune system, destruction of the immune system, and then leaving the body susceptible to the whole host of complications that occur when you have an immune system that's been destroyed.
When a person is infected by HTLV3, that does not mean that these infections and AIDS itself will necessarily be contracted.
We know that some individuals who were exposed over 5 years ago to the virus have only recently developed disease. It may be as more time goes on that we may find out that in some individuals it may take even longer to develop the full-blown disease. And because of this long incubation period, we do not know whether all individuals who are infected will go on to develop the severe disease or only a small proportion of those.
We must assume that if an individual is infected with the virus, even if that person is completely asymptomatic and well, that person is capable of transmitting that virus to another individual. One can isolate the virus from 60% or more of individuals who are completely asymptomatic. Namely, they have absolutely no symptoms, they feel well, but they've been infected with the virus.
We now know that there are 3 possible results once the virus enters the bloodstream.
Since AIDS is an infectious disease, the first step is actually exposure and infection with the virus that we know is HTLV3. And usually through sexual contact, the person is infected with the virus. Usually at that point, the patient is not aware of any change in his physical condition. Have you noticed pain here?
A number of those infected with the virus develop some relatively mild symptoms. This condition is called AIDS-related complex, or more simply, ARC.
Are they tender? Yeah, I think they are slightly enlarged since last visit. These patients have lymph node enlargement or lymphadenopathy. They may have some minor evidence of infection. That is, they may have infection in their mouth with a yeast called thrush. They may have some weight loss. They may have some sweats, night sweats, but without any defined or definite infection. Have you taken your temperature?
Yeah, and it hangs right around 99, 100, right in there.
Okay. Have you had any diarrhea?
I still have the diarrhea.
Have you noticed any skin lesions or any rashes?
While these are among the early mild symptoms of the infections of AIDS virus, they are also symptoms of a variety of other conditions that could affect any of us. Anyone persisting in these symptoms for more than 2 weeks should see a doctor. A growing percentage of the people with AIDS virus infection progress on to full-blown AIDS. The hallmark of the full syndrome is the appearance of opportunistic infections, such as pneumocystis carinii pneumonia or a rare cancer called Kaposi's sarcoma.
Oh, I knew that I had had sexual relations with, I guess you would call them, bisexual men. And had quite a long relationship with a couple of men.
Sonny Sherman has lived with AIDS longer than many. She has had 5 separate bouts with pneumocystis carinii pneumonia.
Go slowly, honey. Okay.
Sonny had been ill for a long time before the AIDS diagnosis was made.
They did my bronchoscopy and diagnosed me on October 13th, 1983 with pneumocystis and AIDS. And I was relieved. I really was. They kept saying to me, you're a diagnostic challenge. We can't figure out what's wrong with you. I was tired of hearing that. I wanted to find out what was wrong and take care of it. And so they started to take care of it. It was a rough few weeks in the hospital. But especially since I never had been exposed to such a tragic type of illness. They usually had a cold or the flu or something like that, but nothing as severe as that pneumonia. It's really, if you let it get you, it's really horrible.
There are strange forms of cancer associated with the disease that have not been seen in young patients, and I think that's the key. We're seeing forms of cancer that are usually typically older patient cancers, and suddenly young people are getting these diseases. Kaposi's is one, but there are many other types.
Ken Meeks learned he had AIDS on Valentine's Day in 1985. It first took the form of a skin cancer. Telling his family about AIDS posed a double challenge for Ken.
His biggest problem was telling me that he was gay.
That's right.
Are we on?
I think that was the biggest problem.
That would be the last thing we would do is disown you. How can anybody disown their children? Something I can't understand. But I guess we're not all the same, right?
I haven't been hospitalized with my KS.
Kaposi's sarcoma often appears as purplish or brownish spots on the skin. Frequently, the spots themselves are painless. Strictly speaking, then, these symptoms of full-blown AIDS are actually the symptoms of those infections that the person with AIDS has contracted. And if death occurs, it is caused by those infections which ravage the body because the immune system has lost its ability to fight them off. The person with AIDS does not readily develop immunity to many of these infections. Because of the weakened immune system, the person with AIDS may face repeated bouts of these infections. As they recur, their effects become more and more devastating, and treatment grows less effective. Also alarming is the fact of long-term damage to the brain or the nervous system.
Every time we did a scan of somebody's brain, the report came back that there were no mass lesions or focal defects in the scan, but that the brain was atrophied or shrunken away to the point where we're doing a study on a man who's 35 and it looks like the brain of a 70-year-old. And as we learned more and more about the AIDS virus, it did become clear that in fact the virus not only infects and affects the immune system but also the central nervous system, and that is very alarming.
That could have very long-term ramifications because we might find people 3, 5, 10 years down the road who don't have AIDS in the classical sense of the word, but have dementia, their ability, their intellectual functions are impaired, maybe even their motor functions are impaired. That could have a tremendous impact socially and economically on this country and the world.
Unfortunately, we do not have a vaccine for AIDS, nor do we have any chemical cure that will return a person with AIDS to normal health. Why is a cure not yet available? We have found cures or vaccines for many past diseases in relatively short periods of time. Is AIDS so different? The answer, in fact, is yes.
It's not like the more commonly known vaccines, such as polio or influenza. We know exactly that if you make a certain antibody against polio or influenza, you will be protected when you're exposed to that virus. So you give a vaccine that will elicit this antibody response, and the people who get vaccinated are protected. We're not certain that that's going to be the case with AIDS.
The HTLV3 virus or the LAV virus has the ability to change its protein code. So we already know that depending on which part of the country you're from, you may have a different serotype of the virus. So developing a vaccine that will be, far-ranging is very difficult.
One of the difficulties in looking for an intervention therapy, for example, a magic bullet or drug for an HTLV3 infection, is that the virus is so intimately associated with the host.
These problems have not stopped scientists from seeking a vaccine or a cure, but they pose unusually difficult challenges. It may take years. A treatment of an infected person poses a two-pronged problem. First, elimination of the virus from the body, and then restoring the immune system so it can begin to function normally in preventing disease. The search goes on, and while it does, prevention is our best means of fighting this epidemic.
The key message really is that AIDS is a preventable disease. We currently have no vaccine, we have no treatment. We do have possible prevention. If people do not put themselves in contact with the virus, they will not get the disease.
And as we now know, people put themselves in contact with the virus through sexual contact and through the sharing of intravenous needles. Controlling such contact is a way of controlling the disease. While some scientists have been seeking a cure, a major accomplishment has been the discovery of a test to detect infection by the virus. Such a screening test is invaluable in preventing the spread of the disease through transfusion of contaminated blood. At a blood donor center, the first part of a screening test involves asking donors about their medical history.
Have you had any night sweats, unexplained fever or weight loss, lumps in your neck, under your arm or your groin? Have you had any discolored areas of your skin or mouth?
The laboratory screening test involves combining samples of a donor's blood with a preparation containing the AIDS virus. If the donor's blood contains antibodies to the virus, they latch onto the virus. Adding another variation of antibody and other chemicals sets the stage for changes in color, which can be electronically detected. If this color change occurs, the blood is considered positive, meaning that the antibody is present. The test is used to screen every unit of blood in blood donation centers in order to assure that all transfused blood is safe. There has never been a risk of getting AIDS by being a blood donor. All equipment, needle, tubing, and blood bag is sterile and used only once. If the blood test is positive, the blood is discarded so as to keep the blood supply safe. The American Red Cross and other blood donor centers will also conduct a second, more specific test to eliminate the possibility of any error. The test does not tell us if a person has AIDS. A positive test is a strong indication that a person has been infected by the virus that causes AIDS. As a result of this test, the blood supply in this country is now much safer than before the test was available. And so are such blood products as factor VIII, the clotting agent needed by people with hemophilia. Unfortunately, before this test was established, blood containing the virus did make its way into the blood supply. As a result, many people with hemophilia and a very few other blood recipients were exposed to the virus. Given the long incubation period of the disease, we may yet see cases of AIDS resulting from blood transfused before the test was developed.
It's a very good test. I also think it's a good test, if done in an anonymous setting, for people to find out whether they're a risk factor.
The good news that we are bringing today. AZT is not a cure for AIDS. Although the study results we are announcing hold great promise for prolonging life for certain patients with AIDS, uncertainties remain. Uncertainties remain.
In November of 1984, we identified a compound, AZT, also known as azidothymidine, compound S, or BWA509U, which inhibited the replication of certain animal viruses in the test tube. At our request, additional studies in December of 1984, as well as January and February of 1985, were performed at 3 other laboratories, which confirmed that AZT was effective in inhibiting the multiplication of the human AIDS virus in the test tube. AZT does have toxicity manifested in some patients by bone marrow suppression, however, and may require careful dosage adjustments by experts familiar with the special problems of AIDS patients. Thus, while AZT represents a significant milestone, it is certainly not the final one in our efforts to conquer this disease.
It's been my very great privilege to John Leadham, LICUSD.
it may eventually allow you to predict which people who have been exposed to the AIDS virus by one means or another will come down with the disease, and those who may have this natural immunity and will not come down with the disease.
It's a medical advance, but unfortunately, I'm afraid that the test will encourage employers to say, aha, here's a device, we can find out who's going to get sick. Let's use this test, let's screen people and not hire people who are positive.
By pinpointing where the body's natural immunity has fought off the virus, you may be able then to narrow down the search for a vaccine.
If it can protect animals, it will give us confidence to move on to the next step to see if it could protect humans. The mouse responds as if it were infected with AIDS virus itself, and it makes antibodies.
I usually save my grieving, my crying, my periods of fear and so on for private times.
We lost our son some 2 months ago. He was still very precious to us. It's not an easy road. It's a road of heartache. It's a road of sorrow.
I declare this Institute for Immunological Disorders open.
In our case, there'll be a lot of new things happening. I mean, almost everything we're going to be doing, in one sense or another, has not really been done before.
It's going to offer me more hope at a much faster rate.
For any signs of redness or swelling, for any drainage or any rash.
This is the typical story of a patient with AIDS. 2 malignancies, multiple infections.
It was very frightening. I kept thinking, I could get this and I could die. But now that I'm being educated about it, it's not that way anymore. I'm not afraid anymore.
Here is a hospital whose entire staff has been trained to touch us without repugnance.
There have been doctors in Houston and all over the United States who have if not actually refused to see patients with AIDS, certainly been very unwilling to do so. And people perceive them as being the leper in modern society, as someone who should be literally given a little bell and told to sit outside the walls of the city.
Times when you be called to go that last mile, strive to do everything that you can to make him comfortable, because he has just received a death sentence.
These are people just like you're a person, and your neighbor's a person, and your daughter's a person. You need to touch them and feel what they feel.
You don't have to have a well-trained phlebotomist to find vein. All you have to do is just sterilize the finger, and with a lancet create two small cuts, and draw a drop of blood on a piece of filter paper and let it dry. This solution can be used to do the test using ELISA or Western blot. We have gone even beyond that step, meaning that directly from the filter you can do the Western blot testing. I think the application is going to be gradually increasing as
Many high fevers that go away and come back, certain kinds of infections, various types of cancers may appear. The person with AIDS may be sick for a while and then get better. Finally, in the most serious stage, the AIDS-infected person becomes so weakened by the AIDS virus that they can no longer fight off all the different types of infections, and they die. If your blood test is negative,
mission, we think that it has to have a variety of skills because it's a very complex problem. So we have as much representation as we can get from the business community, from medicine, from education, and so forth. And we have 2 vacancies to fill, and I'm still hopeful that we'll learn something and find out if there are more things and better things that we can do with regard to this terrible plague. We have spent more money every year, increased on AIDS, and next year, or in the present fiscal year, now that October 1st has passed, we'll be spending over $1 billion on AIDS, and I think we need a commission and someone to help and advise us in how best we can spend that money.
We all grow and learn in our lives, and I've learned that all kinds of people can get AIDS, even children. But it's the disease that's frightening, not the people who have it. You can't catch AIDS from hugging someone. I'm not asking you to send money. I'm asking for something more important. Your understanding. Maybe it's time we all learned something new.
Hi, I'm Johnny Depp of 21 Jump Street. I don't know a whole lot about AIDS, but I want to introduce you to a couple of guys who do. Dr. Robert Wyndham, the Assistant Secretary for Health, and the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. C. Everett Koop.
There are a number of ways to catch AIDS. Casual contact is not one of them, but sexual contact is. If you are not going to abstain or not going to maintain a faithfully monogamous relationship, you can reduce the chance of contracting AIDS if you use a condom. But remember, they may not be 100% effective.
And people with AIDS need a helping hand. Reading, running errands, the little everyday things that we take for granted become almost impossible to do.
Listen, AIDS is very serious and very dangerous. Get involved in your community. Learn all you can. Call 1-800-342-AIDS. Thank you.
We're not advising at all for mothers not to nurse.
So women don't get AIDS nearly as often as men. Only 7% of the people who have the AIDS virus so far are women. Well then, among American men, who gets AIDS? That's our next test question. AIDS carriers in the community come from a lot of different groups in the population. From heterosexuals and people who shoot up drugs, and gays. And which group do you think gets AIDS the most?
When it comes to American men, the highest number of AIDS cases is among A, heterosexuals, B, homosexuals, C, intravenous drug users. This is question number 10. Dr. Wyndham, what's the answer?
B would be homosexuals.
Do they have any idea why the disease seems to have entered this country by the homosexual community?
No, that is not known at all why that happened.
Washington, we turn to Dr. Anthony Fauci at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
Well, I think that certainly the community of male homosexuals have done an extraordinarily good job in educating themselves and in responding to the educational campaigns of others regarding safe sex. So hopefully the increase in infection among the male homosexual population will plateau and go down. Unfortunately, what we will be seeing over the next 5 years is increase in the number of AIDS cases among people who are already infected with the virus. But it is quite true that male homosexuals have been changing their sexual behavior, becoming more monogamous and being more acutely aware of the necessity of safe sex.
Public health.
What you are doing to help another human being. In today's climate of fear and anxiety over AIDS, some people are scared to give blood. They're scared about somehow getting AIDS from giving blood. Are they right to be scared?
That brings up question 23.
You cannot.
Most of the patients want no publicity, fearing that if they're identified as AIDS patients, they'll suffer in their private lives.
AIDS brings a lot of tears on a person. I guess it's the embarrassment, the disassociation with friends. You jump in the swimming pool and they'll all want to jump out if you told them you had AIDS.
How's your wife doing?
She seems to be having some of the symptoms, but she's really a trooper.
Uh-huh.
Leo, with Dr. Gary Bruton, is an ex-professional football player. He's married, heterosexual.
You have the psoriasis now in your hands. I see a few patches on your face, and recently you've noticed that there's more and more of it here on your back.
Yeah.
Leo thinks he's picked up the AIDS virus by being promiscuous in Houston's swinging singles scene before he married.
This has been very stigmatizing to you also, besides just the AIDS.
This has been devastating. You know, you don't work out for so many years and then let your body go.
Uh-huh.
And now that's just what I got to do.
The AIDS virus is different from other kind of viruses like colds and the flu. Those give you a fever, then suddenly it vanished. It never happened.
Not to my knowledge.
Every morning, inpatient, outpatients come to the physiotherapy room if they can. If they can't make it, therapists often provide exercise at bedside, trying to build up muscle tone, stamina, and morale.
Yes, right now I'm suffering from pneumonia again. It's not as serious about as it was before, but any little bit of exercise you can do helps to strengthen and keep your muscle tone, and that way when you get out of the hospital you're that much stronger.
I suppose it is only natural that when a disease is as deadly as AIDS, people become obsessed with it, check their bodies against the AIDS descriptions, worry whether they are suddenly breaking out in a sure sign that they really have AIDS, calling their doctors, worried.
True or false now?
James Hurley, Connecticut attorney, died of AIDS in March 1987.
Start to focus on what the real issue is, and that's prevention. We know so little about AIDS, and yet what's so stunning to me is that we know enough to prevent another person from ever contracting AIDS. And we discuss, should we put that information out? This is craziness. This is where the issue should end. Let the doctors do their part. Let the doctors do the research and develop a vaccine or develop a cure or develop medication that can treat the AIDS virus. But for the rest of us to run around hysterical is hysterical. What we should be doing is educating people. I'm going to stop here, but I want to close by just saying once again, I have AIDS, and AIDS is not my problem any longer. AIDS is your problem, and I hope you'll do something about it. Thank you for listening.
Marvin Feldman, Harry, Lawrence, Richard Anderson, Gary Barnhill, David Calgaro, Bobby Campbell, James Martin Case, Paul Castro, Bill Cathcart, Bob Greenwood, Simon Guzman, Bruce Harris, David Hicks,
Lonnie Dorn, President, National Organization for Women.
Michael Edelman, Norman Armentrout, Tim Barbo, Richard Brower, Gary Cristofoletti, Jim Crandall, Ed Dank, Dennis Dunwoody, Rod Ezio, Rick Black, Tim Graham, Shorty Harris, Don Harrison, Richard Hout, Robin Jacobson, Ken James,
Art Agnos, San Francisco Assemblyman.
Charlie, Vicky Batista, Art Blackboard Jr., Steve Kane, David C. Campbell, Gary Clark, Tom Kulesha, Warren LaFollette, Gary Linsky, Tommy Mitchell, Ron Morini, Lloyd Phelps, Harry Pittman, Ron Julio, Stephen Richards, Bill Richmond,
Tom Harris, Abdul Hoffman, Norman Hughes, David Jackson, Bob Jones, Milton Jordan, David Keenan, Joseph Kenny, Gary King, David Lynch, Roosevelt Montgomery, Scott Oatman, Renee Pelletier,
Michael H. Hollister, Austin Mark Johnson, Jeffrey Kowalczyk, Jay Lambert, Mickey Martin, Mundo Mesa, Jerry Peck, Paul Popham, Bill Powell, Doug Ridley, Marco Uzalkova, Nancy Cole Sawaya, Robert Schwab,
Scott Garrison, Tim Green, Jimmy Harrison, Peter Hollinger, Fritz Holt, Wayne Huff, Carlos Hunter, Albert Jones, David Lanford, Dean R. Worley, and my sweet Susie.
Tom Chaudon, Alan Cherry, Milt Krieger, Charlie Cale Cunningham, Lou Dashiell, Scott Flack, Michelle Foucault, Chuck Furbush, Russ Gardner, Michael H. Greer, Roy Hall, Ricardo Fernandez, Ray Heineman, Paul Lindsay, and my friend and colleague, Michael Bennett.
Barbara Cleaver, mother of AIDS patients, Los Angeles.
Billy Allen, Dan Allen, Clayton Berry, Luciano Caruana, Raymond Case, Dave Castro, Michael DeSantis, Alphonse De Laura, Dennis Dunbar, Robert Ellis, For Everyone, John Ferreira, Phil Harrington, Bill Hartman, Lam Kim Hoon, Jan Johnson, Ken Kuhn, Roger McCoy, James Mincy, Kurt Nora, Hal Riley, Manny Robinson, Al Rosen, Bruce Allen Rudolph,
Philip Dimitri Gallus, Paul Gibson, Larry Burrell, Rock Hudson, Tom Kay, Tim Kane,
Rodney Jewell, Ernest Johnson, Tommy Oates, Stephen Plumley, David Root, James Scaramessi, Stephen Shapiro, John Stem, Jim Swindle, Paul von Steinman, Billy Watkins, Stephen Weber, Ron Whitworth,
Richard N. Eastman, David Edmonds, Stephen Fields, Brady B. Fontenot, T.G., Frank Galloway, Walter Johnson, A. Harley Knight, Michael LaFrance, Michael Lowengram, J. Victor Lopez,
Charlie Case, Alexis True, Howard Powell, Marty Cox, John Gross, Hugh Wade, John Eden,
Heinemann,
Boone Lokioto, Richard Luther, Hank Magdalena, Mike Mellick, Don Morris, Lynn Hall, Robert Penny,
Larry Fernandez, John Gibbs, Kendrick Gifford, Fred Ginsberg, Tim Howes, Danny Hauke, Jerry Johnson, Bryce Holcomb, Brian Hovey, Jeff Lowry, Michael Lowry, Gary Lybrook, Scott Bearding, Glenn Miller, Paul Miller, Greg Richard, Joe Seats, George Sulford, Bill Watson, Henry Weitzer, Doug Ridley, Jerry Peck, Perry Pittman,
Claude Boyd, Michael Cassidy, Tony Cius, David Cohen, Bob Dalterio, Lavelle Dorsey, Charlie Drucker, Alan Faulkner, Paul Fitzsimmons, Calvin Hampton, Frank J. Henry, Eric Jackson, Brian Keith, Gary Arthur Keith, Dave Madison, Alexander Stanley.
La prueba de detección de SIDA usada actualmente es de anticuerpo. En lugar de buscar el virus que produce SIDA, busca anticuerpos, sustancias protectoras producidas por el organismo cuando se ve invadido por el virus. El problema es que una persona puede estar infectada por semanas o meses antes de que produzca bastantes anticuerpos en la sangre. Puede llevar de 3 a 6 meses hasta que un anticuerpo se vea como positivo, pero la persona puede estar infectada y contagiar. La prueba de anticuerpo no resuelve el problema. La nueva prueba busca el virus mismo. Desarrollada por una empresa de investigaciones de Maryland, es producto del trabajo cumplido por el Instituto Nacional del Cáncer de Estados Unidos. Al extraer la sangre, las células blancas son separadas y mezcladas con sondas genéticas destinadas a penetrar esas células y atacar el virus si es que existe. Luego de 2 días de incubación, se emiten partículas visibles en microscopio. La examinación lleva unos 10 minutos. Puede detectar una célula infectada en un campo de 100.000. Por ahora es solo un medio investigativo por su complejidad, lentitud y costo de casi $200, muy elevado para un examen sanguíneo de rutina. Se afirma que detecta SIDA mucho antes que con la prueba anticuerpo y estará en los laboratorios dentro de algunos meses. Es una herramienta muy poderosa. No hubo nada igual. Cuanto antes se ponga en uso diario, mejores serán los resultados. Aparte del sistema empleado, el Dr. O recomienda extremo cuidado. Debemos detener el comportamiento de alto riesgo al margen de resultados positivos o negativos en las pruebas.